Well, I mean, imagine finding out that your personality, your darkest anxieties, your most profound moments of joy, and even like the physical chair you are sitting on right now are all made of the exact same three invisible ropes.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Right, like what if the very fabric of your reality just isn't what you think it is?
Yeah.
What if you aren't this static individual with a set of traits, but rather, you were just a highly complex knot tied out of these cosmic threads?
It completely shatters our modern, I guess, our westernized way of looking at the world. Because when we asked what something is made of today, we immediately look through this physical lens. We pull out the microscope.
Yeah, we look for atoms and molecules.
Exactly. We look for quarks, strings, all of that. But there is a totally different framework for understanding existence, and one that predates our microscopes by, well, thousands of years. And instead of looking at physical particles, it looks at the foundational architecture of consciousness and nature itself.
And that is the incredibly ambitious mission of our deep dive today. We are unpacking this massive, truly universe-bending presentation stack on ancient Indian philosophy. Specifically, we are diving into a school of thought known as the Sāṃkhyadarśane.
Right, the Samkhya school.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Sāṃkhya roughly translates to the innumerable or declarative philosophy, mainly because the thinkers behind it just love to relentlessly count, categorize, and declare all the distinct components of reality. And from this giant mountain of source material, we're going to zoom in on one specific concept that is honestly going to change how you view your own mind. And that is the guṇa.
It is the absolute perfect starting point. But, before we get into the actual mechanics of what a guna really is, the source material emphasizes how these ancient texts traditionally open. Like, they don't start with a dry table of contents or some academic abstract.
Right, they aren't textbooks.
Exactly. They begin with these profound, almost desperate prayers. For instance, the stack highlights a really beautiful Tamil text called the Tiruvakakam, which opens by invoking a sort of divine grace to wash away all former deeds and accumulated karma.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the idea is that your mind basically needs to be scrubbed entirely clean before it can even begin to process the weight of these concepts.
It's kind of like admitting that our default state of mind is just way too cluttered and, I don't know, arrogant to absorb the truth of the universe. You literally have to actively beg for a blank slate just to get to the starting line.
That is the exact sentiment. And the sources also point to a very famous invocation from a Sanskrit text, the Baharanyaka Upanyand. It's this plea that translates to, lead me from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light.
That's beautiful.
It really is. And I wanted to bring this up right at the beginning because understanding the Gudas, which is the entire focus of our discussion today, is literally the ancient roadmap for that specific journey. It is the step-by-step mechanism for how a human being actually moves from the darkness of illusion into the light of reality.
Okay, well, let's unpack the stage on which this all happens, because, I mean, you can't really understand these cosmic ropes without knowing what they're actually tying together.
Right, you need the context.
Exactly. So, according to the sources, Samkhya is one of the 6 orthodox Vedic philosophies. And the beating heart of this entire worldview is a concept called ontological dualism, which basically means if you boil the entire infinite universe down to its absolute most basic, irreducible components, you don't end up with one unified field.
No, you end up with 2 completely distinct realities, 2 ultimate realities that can never, ever be reduced into one another.
That is such a departure from a lot of other philosophies that say everything is just one big cosmic soup.
It is a massive departure. So the first of these realities is called Puai, and you can basically think of Puai as pure transcendent spirit or just pure consciousness.
Okay, pure consciousness.
But it's crucial to understand how Samkhya defines consciousness here, because it's not how we normally use the word. Purai does absolute live nothing.
Wait, really? Nothing at all?
Nothing. It is entirely inactive. It doesn't think. It doesn't plan. It doesn't feel emotions. It is strictly the observer. It is just the infinite witness.
A silent witness, just like watching the show?
Precisely. And then, on the exact opposite side of this absolute divide, you have the second reality, which is Prakriti. And Prakriti is nature. It is matter. It is the primordial creative force of the cosmos.
So basically everything else.
Everything. Everything in your experience that moves, changes, vibrates, thinks, or acts is Prakriti. But the huge catch here is that Prakriti, on its own, is completely blind.
Blind meaning unconscious.
Yes, it has zero consciousness. It is just raw churning machinery. So you have Purua, which is fully conscious but totally paralyzed, and prati, which is incredibly active but completely unconscious. And the source texts describe the relationship between these two realities as an unbound wedlock.
Unbound wedlock. That is such a haunting phrase. I mean, they are married, but there's no actual chain holding them together.
Exactly.
To help visualize how this bizarre marriage actually functions, the ancient thinkers came up with this brilliant analogy. The sources call it the antapagunyaya, which roughly translates to the blind lame axiom.
It's one of my favorite analogies in all of philosophy.
It's so good. So the text asks you to imagine two people trying to escape from a dangerous, dense forest. The first person has absolute perfect 20/20 vision, but they are completely paralyzed from the neck down. They can move a single muscle.
So that would be Puro.
Right. Pure vision, pure awareness, but zero capacity for action. The seer who cannot step forward. And the second person in this forest has incredibly strong legs. They are like this elite athlete who can run, climb, and push through any obstacle. But they were born completely blind.
So they have the physical power to escape, but they have absolutely no idea what direction to run in.
Exactly. If they try to run on their own, they'll just smash into a tree.
Yeah.
And that is Kukyu, the blind machinery of nature. So to survive, what do? The paralyzed person with perfect vision climbs onto the shoulders of the blind person with strong legs.
It's a perfect symbiosis.
Right. The blind person provides all the locomotion, all the movement, and the paralyzed person provides the direction, the awareness. And together, they form one perfect functioning entity that can navigate out of the forest.
It really is a stunning way to frame existence. Because if you think about it, Prakriti is providing the engine for everything in the universe. The spinning of galaxies, the orbit of planets, even the digestion of food in your stomach or the firing of neurons in your brain. That is all the blind person running.
Just blind machinery doing its thing.
Yeah, but that blind machinery only organizes itself into a coherent, purposeful reality because Purua, the conscious observer, is effectively sitting on its shoulders, giving that machinery an audience and a sense of direction.
And if you are listening to this right now, trying to figure out how this highly abstract concept actually applies to you, just think about your own internal life. Like, have you ever felt that bizarre split inside yourself?
Oh, absolutely.
Where, you are incredibly angry or you are crying, but there is this tiny, quiet part of your mind just lingering in the background, just watching you be angry.
Yes, the part of you that is observing the anger and saying, wow, I am really losing my temper right now.
Exactly. That quiet awareness, that pure observing presence that never actually gets swept away by the emotion itself, that is Puro. And the rushing blood, the racing thoughts, the physical tears, all the chaotic machinery of your body and mind doing the acting, that is Pruiti.
That is the perfect modern application of this. Your identity, your ego, your emotions, your physical form, all of that belongs to Prituli. That's the blind person carrying you forward. The silent watcher situated behind the eyes is Puro.
But this brings us to what I think is the most massive question of our deep dive today. If Pritudi is this blind, hyperactive force of nature carrying us around, what is she actually made of? Like, what is the muscle and bone of those strong legs?
And that question leads us directly into the core of the sources, which is the Gutas. Now, if you go online right now and look up a standard English translation of these ancient Indian texts, you will almost always see the word gutan translated as a quality or an attribute.
Right. Which makes an English reader naturally think it just means an adjective, like the redness of a tomato, or the sharpness of a blade, or the sadness of a song.
Exactly. But the presentation stack makes it abundantly clear that this translation is just a catastrophic underestimation of what Samkhya is actually talking about. I mean, it doesn't even scratch the surface.
So it's not just an adjective.
Not at all. To really grasp it, we have to look at the etymology provided by the source material. They reference this ancient text called the Nirukta, which is essentially one of the oldest classical Sanskrit thesauruses in human history.
Okay, a thesaurus, what does it say?
So, the Nirukta breaks down the root origins of the word gut. It shares a linguistic root with the verb ma, which means to measure. It's heavily related to quantity and to deliberate arrangement, which in Sanskrit is amantram. But most importantly for our purposes today, it is intrinsically linked to the word sutra.
Sutra. I've heard that before.
Yeah, and sutra literally means a physical thread, a strand, or a cord.
Wait, so it's not just a descriptive word. It's an actual structural component, like a literal rope.
Yes. To illustrate how radical this shift in thinking is, the sources contrast Samkhya with another orthodox school of Indian philosophy called the Vaishika school.
Okay, how do they view it?
Well, the Maishita thinkers viewed the universe much closer to how we view it in the modern West today. They believed a gutta was, in fact, just a static property. They argued that you have a physical substance, so let's say a wooden table.
Right, a solid wooden table.
And then you have guttas that essentially inhere or attach themselves to that substance. So the table has the gutta of brownness, it has the gutta of hardness, the gutta of being rectangular. The substance itself is real, and the guttas are just the adjectives describing it.
Wait, okay, you're going to have to walk me through the alternative here, because my modern brain is really struggling to process the opposite of that. Are you saying Samkhya believes that the brownness or the hardness isn't just a description, that the adjective itself is like a physical, tangible rope?
That is exactly the leap you have to make to understand this philosophy. Samkhya violently rejects the Vaishyanka model. They argue that there is no separate underlying substance that somehow possesses a quality.
So there's no invisible table underneath the brownness.
Exactly. The quality is the substance. The guttas are not abstract adjectives floating around in the ether. They are substantive entities. They are the subtle potencies, the actual raw stuff of existence.
That is wild.
If you take away the brownness, the hardness, and the rectangular shape, there is no mystical tableness left behind. The object is literally just a bundle of these guttas tied together.
That is just a staggering way to view reality. The scholar Surendranath Dasgupta, who wrote one of the most exhaustive histories of Indian philosophy we have in the sources, he frames this perfectly. He explicitly says that the guttas are infinite in number, but they are ultimately ropes that chain the soul down to thought and matter. Like they are the literal building materials of your environment and your mind.
They are the building blocks. And there's also this remarkable quote in the stack from a lecture by Swami Vivekananda that illustrates this substantive nature so well. He told his audience, quote, "Guttas are not qualities, but the materials of the universe. The soul is pure and perfect, and the guttas are like particles of glass that cover it."
Particles of glass, and it gives it such a physical weight. It implies something that can actually scratch you, something that refracts light, something that fundamentally distorts whatever you are trying to look at through it.
It actively creates a barrier, and Dasgupta elaborates on this idea of infinite materials. He points out that while we look around the universe and see seemingly infinite qualities, right? Infinite shades of color, infinite variations of texture, endless spectrums of human emotion from rage to euphoria.
Right. The universe seems infinitely complex.
Exactly. But Samkhya claims that all of these infinite variations are not unique substances. They are actually just endless permutations, endless combinations of three primary stuffs.
Oh, I see. It's like having three primary colors of paint. And from just red, yellow, and blue, you can mix every single color in an art museum.
That is the perfect analogy.
So the sources refer to this foundational trinity as Trigut Atmakam, the triple nature of reality. These three ultimate cosmic strands, the three ropes that weave everything together, are Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas.
And this is where the philosophy becomes incredibly practical for everyday life. Because once you learn to recognize these three strands, you will start seeing them operating everywhere in your own life. Dasgupta categorizes them broadly as intelligent stuff, energy stuff, and mass stuff. Everything you have ever touched, thought, or felt is just a specific ratio of these three raw materials.
Okay, let's really break these down because this is the core of it all. Starting with the first strand, which is sattva. So the sources describe sattva as buoyant, illuminating, and pure. Its etymological root is sat, which translates to serenity, goodness, or just pure existence.
Right, the principle of light.
Yeah. It is the god associated with pleasure, with intelligence, and visually, it is mapped to the color white. And if you look at the cosmic geography laid out in the texts, sattva is actually linked to the highest heaven realm, which is Fargaloka.
So the easiest way to conceptualize sattva is to think of it as the principle of clarity and lightness. Like Dasgupta said, it is the intelligent stuff. When sattva is dominant in your mind, consciousness is able to reflect perfectly. Think of it like a completely still, crystal clear lake on a totally windless day.
Where you can see straight to the bottom.
Exactly. It's that feeling of sudden comprehension. You know, when a really complex problem suddenly makes perfect sense. Or that deep, unshakable peace you feel when everything is exactly as it should be. That is sattva.
But obviously, a perfectly still lake doesn't actually get anything done. Which brings us to the second strand, and that is rajas. So rajas is described as exciting, mobile, and passionate. Its linguistic root is runj, which means to move, to color, or to become.
It's all about action.
Right, and interestingly, it is associated with pain, with relentless action, and visually with the color red or pink. Cosmically, it maps to the mid-region sky, the atmosphere, known as the Bhuvarloka.
So if sattva is the steering wheel, rajas is the engine. It is the energy stuff. It is the fundamental principle of kinetic energy, a vibration of sheer momentum, because without the strand of rajas, the universe would just be completely frozen.
Right, nothing would ever happen.
Nothing would change, grow, or evolve. But the ancient thinkers understood physics on a deep intuitive level here. Movement inherently creates friction, and friction causes heat, degradation, and ultimately suffering. That is why this strand of boundless energy and passion is intrinsically linked to pain.
It's the burning of the fuel. You can't have energy without burning something.
Exactly.
And finally, we have the third strand, which is tamas. Now, tamas is basically the complete opposite of sattva. It is sluggish, it's enveloping, and it is heavily restrictive. Its root is as, representing inertia and darkness.
The heavy stuff.
Yeah, the mass stuff. It is associated with delusion, with physical mass, with the color black, and with the dense earth realm we live in, the Bhuloka.
Tamasa basically serves as the brakes of the universe. It is the principle of inertia, resistance, and solidity. Without tamas, nothing would have a physical boundary. Everything would just be vibrating energy or pure light. It provides the heavy grounding that literally makes a rock a rock.
But what about when it applies to the mind?
Right. When applied to psychology and the mind, tamas manifests as ignorance, lethargy, and this profound, heavy opacity. It is what makes the mind dense and unable to perceive the truth.
And the sources actually take this a step further. They map these three strands to actual cosmic powers, which they call siktis. So sattva is the manifestation of Jnana Shakti, the power of supreme wisdom. Rajas is the manifestation of Kriya Shakti, the raw power of action. And tamas is Icha Shakti, the power of inertia and will that roots everything down.
It's a beautifully symmetrical system, really, but, I think it can sound very abstract when we talk about cosmic powers and heaven realms. The real brilliance of Samkhya is that it applies just as much to your Tuesday morning as it does to the birth of a galaxy.
Oh, absolutely. Let's actually trace that out for the listener, because this is where it clicks. Think about your standard everyday morning routine. So the alarm clock goes off at 6 a.m. You open your eyes, but your eyelids feel like they weigh 50 pounds. Your brain is entirely shrouded in fog. Your limbs feel like lead. And your only overriding desire is to just sink back into the mattress and pull the darkness back over your head.
We've all been there.
Right. In that specific moment, you are drowning in tamas. The mass stuff, that heavy, restrictive inertia, is the dominant rope tying your consciousness together right then.
It is a literal physical and mental heaviness. The tamas is acting like a thick, heavy blanket over your awareness.
But then you glance at the clock and you realize you slept through the first 3 alarms and you are going to be incredibly late for a vital meeting at work.
And the panic sets in.
Instantly, panic floods your system. You leap out of bed. You are frantically throwing clothes on. You accidentally knock over your water glass. You are mentally calculating the fastest possible route through rush hour traffic while your heart just pounds in your chest. That chaotic, frenetic explosion of movement. That is Rajas taking over.
The energy stuff has become the dominant strand.
Exactly. It is highly mobile, it is deeply passionate, and it is undeniably causing you psychological pain and stress.
The engine is revving, but there's immense friction.
And then, miraculously, you actually make it to work on time. You sit down at your desk, you pour a fresh cup of coffee, and you take one long, deep breath. The panic totally evaporates. Your heart rate slows down. Your mind clears completely, and you feel this pristine, lucid focus as you calmly plan out the tasks for your day. You feel balanced, aware, and capable. That serene clarity is sattva.
The intelligent stuff has finally subdued the other two and is illuminating your mind like a perfectly still lake.
It's crazy to think about. You are the exact same individual, the same underlying pure observer, but within the span of a single hour, the ratio of the stuff wrapping around your consciousness mutated entirely.
It's a phenomenal exercise to just track that progression in yourself. But this brings up a really crucial rule that the sources hammer home again and again. These 3 gunas are never, ever isolated.
You can't just separate them.
No, you can never find pure sattva or pure tamas sitting in a jar somewhere on their own. They are trapped in a constant, dynamic, inescapable dance. They're completely inseparable.
So they are always together, just in different proportions.
Yeah, exactly. The Sāṃkhyadarśane, which is one of the foundational bedrock texts of this entire philosophy, explains that the constant swirling interaction of these three specific guches is what generates the immense complexity of our reality. The text details how the intermingling of just these three strands creates over 50 different complex derivations, and it maps out the 24 primary principles of reality. Everything from the macrocosmic elements all the way down to the micro-functioning of human ego and sensory organs.
It's genuinely like having three primary colors of paint that mix and swirl to paint the entire universe.
Yeah.
But how do they actually interact? Like, if there are just three ropes, what are the actual mechanics of their relationship?
So the sources bring in the work of a philosopher named Bhaskapati Mishra. He wrote a deeply influential commentary on the Sāṃkhyadarśane, and he laid out 4 specific methods of operation for how the guches engage with one another.
Okay, what's the first one?
It's a fascinating mechanical breakdown. So the first method Bhaskapati Mishra identifies is that the guches are mutually subjugative.
Mutually subjugative, meaning they subjugate each other.
Exactly. This means they are locked in a perpetual, relentless battle for dominance. One gun must actively subdue and suppress the other two to achieve its temporary goal. Going back to your morning routine, to achieve that calm clarity of sattva at your desk, that sattva energy literally had to wrestle and pin down your rajasic panic and your tamasic exhaustion. It is a constant turf war for the throne of your reality.
Okay, but wait. If they're constantly trying to crush and subjugate each other, how does anything actually get built? Wouldn't they just paralyze each other in a stalemate?
And that leads directly to the second method of operation. They are also mutually supporting.
Supporting while they're fighting.
Yes. Even though they fight for dominance, they absolutely rely on each other to function. Think about Sāṃkhya. It provides the brilliant clarity of an idea, but without the chaotic kinetic energy of rajas to actually execute that idea, it just remains an inert dream.
Oh, I see.
And rajas need sattva to give its frantic movement a direction, otherwise it's just a destructive explosion. And both of them desperately need the heavy, grounded inertia of tamas to give their actions a physical boundary, like a tangible reality to exist within.
So they fight, but they prop each other up. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the third method?
The third method is that they are mutually productive, and this touches on a massive philosophical concept in Samkhya called Sāṃkhyadarśane.
Sāṃkhyadarśane.
Yeah. In modern terms, it is essentially the ancient Indian equivalent of the law of conservation of energy. Sāṃkhyadarśane states that an effect already pre-exists within its cause. The gunas do not magically create something out of nothing. When they produce a new effect, whether that's a new thought in your brain or a new physical object in the world, that effect is just a structural modification of the gunas themselves.
So they just mutate.
They mutate, they shift their ratios, but the total amount of raw stuff in the universe remains entirely constant.
They just continuously recycle themselves into new forms. That is super interesting. And the fourth method?
The fourth method is that they are mutually cooperative, meaning they never, ever exist apart from one another.
But hold on, you kind of lost me on the logic here. How can these strands be actively mutually subjugative, literally fighting tooth and nail to suppress each other, and at the exact same time be mutually cooperative? That feels like a glaring paradox in the philosophy. I mean, they can't be at war and in perfect cooperation simultaneously.
It absolutely sounds like a contradiction, and it's a brilliant point of friction to bring up. But the ancient texts actually anticipated this confusion. The source materials pull from a major scriptural text called the Devavagavata Pula to resolve this exact paradox.
Okay, how do they resolve it?
This text describes the three gunas not just as physical forces, but as mutual consorts. It states, quite poetically, the first separation of these has never been perceived. They are eternally omnipresent together.
Mutual consorts.
Yeah.
That implies a relationship that you can never escape, like a three-way marriage where divorce is ontologically impossible.
Precisely the right framework. The best analogy I've found to explain this tension is to picture a three-legged race. But instead of 2 people, you have 3 runners whose legs are all tightly bound together at the ankles.
Oh, this is good. Okay.
And they all have vastly different personalities. One wants to run toward the light, one wants to run in chaotic circles, and one just wants to lie down in the mud. They are constantly pushing and pulling against each other, shoving shoulders, arguing about the direction. That is the mutually subjugative part. They are fighting for dominance.
But they're tied together.
Exactly. Because they're literally tied together, if they want to move even a single inch forward, they are forced to coordinate their rhythm. They have to synchronize their steps. They have to cooperate.
Wow. So that tension is actually the secret ingredient. They are forced to work together by the inescapable nature of their bond. Sattva is pulling up, Tamas is dragging down, Rajas is violently pushing forward, and that exact excruciating tension is the mechanism that allows the universe to walk. Because without the fighting, there would be no structure.
That tension is literally the heartbeat of Brigade. But this raises a profound question. We've spent all this time analyzing the philosophy, the mechanics, the psychology, but the sources we are deep diving into also dedicate a massive amount of time to the theology of the gunas.
Right, the religious aspect.
Yeah. How did these ancient seers envision these three strands actually initiating the dawn of creation? How does a three-legged race build a cosmos?
The cosmogenesis aspect of this stack is wild. The sources pull from some deeply vivid, ancient scriptural roots to explain how the gunas birthed the universe. For instance, there's a reference to the Atharva Veda, which is one of the oldest sacred texts in Hinduism.
It is incredibly ancient.
Yeah, and it speaks of this mysterious cosmic lotus flower that has 9 distinct gates, and this entire lotus is tightly encircled by 3 strands.
It's a heavily coded metaphor. So the lotus with 9 gates is a symbolic representation of the human body, which has 9 physical openings to the outside world. And the fact that it is encircled by 3 strands is the ancient text's way of declaring that our entire physical, sensory existence is completely bound and constructed by the 3 gutas.
It's such a beautiful image. But the metaphor that generally stopped me in my tracks is from the Svetashvatara Upanishad. It is so visceral and strange. It describes a birthless individual soul, which it personifies as a he-goat.
A he-goat, yes.
And this eternal he-goat is enjoying a deep sleep alongside a she-goat. But the she-goat is entirely made up of 3 distinct colors, red, white, and black. And together, through their union, they give birth to endless offspring that share their nature.
It is a phenomenal piece of theological poetry that perfectly encapsulates everything we've talked about today. The he-goat is Purua, right? The pure, observing, inactive soul. The she-goat is Prakriti, the fertile, creative nature.
And the colors match up perfectly.
Exactly. Those 3 colors, red, white, and black, are the exact visual representations of the gutas we unpacked earlier. Red is the passionate rajas, white is the pure sattva, and black is the heavy tamas. The offspring they continuously generate is the entire manifest, shifting universe.
And the presentations deck connects this ancient poetry to another vital text, the Panchakartragama, specifically zooming in on a section called the Lakshmi Tantra.
That's a crucial text.
It is. Here, the perspective shifts entirely to the Divine Mother, the supreme feminine creative force. She is explaining the nature of her own attributeless supreme will. She declares that in her ultimate form, she is completely beyond these 3 strands, but she actively utilizes them to forge reality. And she uses this incredibly tangible, brilliant analogy to explain how it happens. She says, and I'm quoting here, just as the transparent juice of the sugarcane assumes the form of molasses, so does transparent knowledge evolve into sattva.
I want to really sit with that analogy for a second because it is doing a lot of heavy lifting. If you have ever seen raw sugarcane juice being processed, it starts out thin, highly fluid, clear, and essentially transparent. But when you apply intense heat to it, when you put it in a vat and just boil it, a radical mutation occurs.
It completely changes form.
The clear liquid bubbles, it thickens, it loses its transparency, and it darkens into a dense, sticky, opaque molasses. It is fundamentally the exact same substance. Nothing new is added, but its state of reality has been entirely transformed by energy.
The transparent liquid has been boiled down into a physical, sticky reality.
Exactly. The Divine Mother is explaining that her pure, unmanifested knowledge, which is formless, transparent, and infinite, is subjected to the heat of creation. It boils down, it thickens, and it mutates into sattva, the first palpable, luminous strand of reality. And as the heat continues, her boundless power mutates and thickens into the energetic rajas, and finally, her will condenses into the dark, heavy, molasses-like tamas.
And once she has these 3 cosmic ropes, she uses them to dictate the entire timeline of the universe's life cycle. The sources map this out with incredible precision. Like, think about the very beginning, the phase of creation. It makes perfect logical sense that Rajas is the dominant gu during creation.
You need a massive, explosive, kinetic energy to birth a universe out of nothingness.
Exactly. Then you move into the phase of sustenance, like maintaining the universe so it doesn't immediately collapse. Here, sattva dominates. You need balance, peace, luminous order, and intelligence to keep the planets in orbit and life flourishing. And finally, you inevitably reach the phase of dissolution or destruction. In this end stage, tamas dominates. The heavy inertia, the darkness, and the sluggishness take over to grind all that kinetic energy to a halt and bring the universe back to a state of rest.
For anyone familiar with broader Indian theology, a massive light bulb should be going off right now. This timeline perfectly mirrors the absolute highest tier of the Hindu pantheon, the Trimurti, or the Hindu Trinity.
Right. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva.
Exactly. You have Brahma, the creator, whose domain is defined by the explosive energy of rajas. You have Vishnu, the sustainer, whose domain is the balanced, luminous order of sattva. And you have Rudra, or Shiva, the destroyer, whose domain is the ultimate dissolution brought on by tamas. It reveals just how inextricably Samkhya philosophy is woven into the very DNA of the religion. The ancient seers basically took these abstract philosophical ropes of stuff and personified them into the highest cosmic deities.
It is a completely unified theory. The philosophy provides the mechanics, and the theology provides the narrative. But this brings us to a really massive, slightly terrifying question that has been looming over this entire deep dive.
What is it?
Well, let's pull back from the cosmic deities and return to the individual. Let's go back to the paralyzed man in the forest, or the he-goat in the poem. If the pure soul, the Purua, is entirely transcendent, if it is truly just a clear, inactive observer sitting safely on the shoulders of the blind machinery, how on earth did it get tangled up in these sticky, heavy ropes in the first place?
That is the big one.
Right. Why does it experience psychological pain? Why does it suffer if it isn't actually doing anything?
That is the ultimate question of human existence, isn't it? To answer that, the sources direct us to a profound text called the Kapila, which is located within the larger Bhagavata Purana. It is this deeply philosophical dialogue where the great sage Kapila is gently instructing his own mother on the fundamental nature of reality and suffering. And in this text, Kapila pinpoints the exact tragic mechanism of our suffering. He explains that living entities become illusioned specifically by what he calls the knowledge-covering feature of tamas.
The knowledge-covering feature. So wait, we have to expand our definition of tamas again. It isn't just physical mass or the headiness of sleep. It is an active, aggressive obscuring of the truth.
It is an active blinder. In many other Indian philosophical traditions, this concept is famously referred to as Maya, the grand illusory energy. Tamas acts like a thick, black velvet veil. It drops down over the pure, crystalline consciousness of the Puro, and it acts almost like a spiritual anesthetic. It induces a profound cosmic amnesia, a state the texts call avidya, which basically translates to fundamental ignorance or forgetfulness.
The soul literally forgets its own nature. It forgets it is the silent watcher.
Yes, and here is where Samkhya delivers its most profound psychological insight. Because of this tamasic forgetfulness, the pure spirit is sitting there watching the swirling, chaotic material energy of prakriti. It is watching the body get sick. It is watching the brain generate anxious thoughts. It is watching the heart feel grief. But instead of recognizing that it is just watching a machine operate, it says, that is me. I am the one doing that.
It completely accepts the material blind energy as its own identity.
Exactly. It identifies with the meat suit. It thinks it is the strong legs running through the forest rather than the paralyzed visionary sitting on the shoulders.
And it's crucial to remember, it isn't just identifying with the physical flesh, right? It's identifying with the invisible mental machinery as well.
Right. The mind, the intellect, the memory. Samkhya classifies all of that as prakriti, as material nature. And the very millisecond that this false identification takes place, something entirely new and devastating is born into the world. And that is the ahakara.
The ahakara, the human ego.
The ego. The texts call it the self-erogative principle. And right alongside the birth of the I comes the birth of mamakara, which is the deeply rooted concept of mine. My body, my thoughts, my wealth, my pain. Suddenly, the pure, infinite observer truly believes it is a finite, active participant in the chaos. It believes it owns the things it is observing. It believes it is the author of its actions.
The tragedy of this, but also, the strange beauty of it, is staggering when you really think about it. The spirit, the true Purua, has never actually done a single thing in the history of the universe. It just watches. Yet because it is tightly wrapped up in these three gunas, and because it is blinded by that heavy veil of tamas, it wrongly claims ownership of all the frenetic, painful activities of nature.
It is the ultimate tragic case of mistaken identity. The physical body gets injured, the nerves send a signal to the brain, and the soul, trapped in the ego, cries out, I am in excruciating pain. The biological brain solves a complex mathematical puzzle using sattva, and the soul proudly declares, I am a genius.
It takes the credit for everything.
Exactly. The ego accumulates material wealth driven by rajas, and the soul feels arrogant and says, I am successful. It feels the happiness, it feels the deep distress, and most importantly, it feels an agonizing sense of limitation, which the ancient texts refer to as a kavamala. It truly believes it is a tiny, fragile, mortal creature that is going to die, rather than realizing it is the infinite transcendent observer that was never born in the first place.
Okay, the best way I can conceptualize this is to think about going to a really intense, immersive movie theater. You sit down in a dark room, in a comfortable chair. You know you were just a person sitting in a chair, but then the movie starts. And it is so gripping, the surround sound is so loud, the acting is so visceral that you completely forget the chair. You forget the room entirely.
You're completely sucked in.
Right. And when the terrifying monster jumps out on the screen, your heart rate skyrockets, you grip the armrests in genuine terror, and for a split second, you actually believe you are about to be murdered. You have completely forgotten that you are just safely watching light hit a piece of fabric on a wall. The ghosts are the projector, the film reel, the surround sound, and the hypnotic trance all rolled into one cosmic cinema.
That is a phenomenal modern translation of the Kapilappadesha. The entire Samkhya philosophy, all of these complex breakdowns of ropes and realms, is ultimately just a diagnostic medical manual for this exact condition. It is a roadmap attempting to tap you on the shoulder in the dark theater and remind you, you are the watcher in the chair. You are not the horrifying movie playing on the screen.
So let's pull all of these massive universe-bending threads together and bring it right into your lap. What does this all mean for you, the person listening to this deep dive right now? It means that if you view the world through this ancient, profound lens, you are forced to stop seeing yourself as a static individual. You are not a fixed collection of unchanging personality traits. You are a fluid, deeply dynamic, ever-shifting interplay of three cosmic ropes.
You are sattva, the illuminating light, the profound peace, the moments of crystal clear intelligence. You are rajas, the relentless action, the burning passion, the ambition, and the anxiety. And you are tamas, the heavy inertia, the physical boundaries, the exhaustion, and the stubborn ignorance.
They are constantly wrestling inside you every single second of your life, pinning each other down, supporting each other, mutating from clear juice into thick molasses, fighting in that three-legged race to drag you through your day. But the ultimate comfort is this. Beneath all of that chaos, beneath your groggy tamasic mornings, your frantic rajasic afternoons, and your calm sattvic evenings, your true self, the Purua, is completely, eternally untouched. It is just sitting back, silently watching the blind, brilliant genius of Prakriti carry you through the forest of your life.
And understanding that architecture naturally leads to a final, rather provocative philosophical knot, building on the trajectory of everything the sources have given us today. The texts are very clear that the ultimate goal of understanding Samkhya is liberation. The goal is to realize that you are the pure observer, to actively untangle your true self from the sticky, blinding strands of the gunas.
Right, the classic definition of spiritual enlightenment, waking up in the movie theater.
But consider the ultimate paradox of that goal. We established earlier that every single thought, every moment of clarity, every desire for knowledge, and every philosophical pursuit you could possibly have is ultimately constructed out of the sattva, the intelligence stuff. Which means, isn't the very desire to achieve spiritual liberation, the very thought of wanting to be free, just the highest, most refined form of the material world trying to look at itself in a mirror?
Oh, wow. I need a second to process that. You're saying that the burning desire to be totally free of the goose is, in itself, still just a goose doing the desiring. It's just sattva wanting to be pure.
Yes. It forces you to ask, can the cosmic rope ever truly untie itself using its own threads? Or, at the very end of the spiritual journey, when you finally reach the edge of the forest, do you just have to drop the rope entirely?
That is a staggering thought to chew on. Thank you so much for taking this incredibly expansive deep dive with us today. As you go about the rest of your day, as you commute or work or talk to your family, try to take one small moment to pause and ask yourself, which gati is driving the machinery right now? Are you heavy with tamas? Are you rushing with rajas? Or are you clear with sattva? Don't try to change it, just watch it happen. You might just catch a fleeting glimpse of the silent observer sitting just behind the veil,